All right, welcome back to Women's Gut Health YouTube channel. Today, here's what we're doing. We're making a dish, which is oven-baked risotto. Super easy, and it's really versatile. Now, the reason that I love oven-baked risotto is because like you're eating tons of white rice, right? You're sick of white rice. I feel you, and I understand. Rice is great when you have diarrhea because it really does bind things up. However, then you're not getting enough protein. And so, what I really want to focus on is to remind you, number one, that if we bind things up too much with these starchy foods, sometimes that messes with, obviously our gut microbiome. It really depletes a lot of those good bacteria, but we're not getting any protein and we're not going to have any energy. And if you have diarrhea, then you're already not going to have very much energy. So keep that in mind. I am a gut health expert and registered dietitian, and I have Crohn's disease. So I've had it all, right? Diarrhea, constipation, and bloating, which is why I've dedicated my life to helping women get to the root cause of diarrhea, constipation, and bloating so they can have predictable bowel movements. One of the ways that I like to bring protein into the dish is by using bone broth. This is actually my favorite bone broth. It's Sam's Choice, so I get it from Walmart. Pick up. Now, bone broth is awesome because it has protein 9 grams per cup of protein versus a chicken stock that has about 2 grams, and this is 350. So I know we can get into the kettle and fire and the brodo and all the really high-end bougie kind of bone broth type things. We're not doing that here because we don't have time for that, and we're trying to prioritize a lot of different things because we're busy, right? So I'm not trying to spend $10 on a bone broth that's going to go into something. But if I was using it for sipping or something like that, this is actually really good. I would probably sip it. But if you want like a lavender or a turmeric, you want to get bougie with it, you do you. Now, the risotto is going to have a couple different things. So number one, you'll see in the recipe, and you can always download all the recipes from my channel. All you have to do is click once and all the recipes will be there. And every time I upload a new one, it's there. So in this recipe, you'll see there's like some different kinds of variations. And that's because everyone has different things that they can tolerate, different things that they need. If you're really not feeling well, but you want something besides just plain white rice, this is a great option, and you can keep it as plain as you want. Now, I encourage you to not be afraid of fresh herbs. My favorite way to use fresh herbs is to grow them. So it's kind of like a fun activity that does relax your nervous system a little, gardening. And also, fresh herbs are a powerhouse of nutrients. So it's an easy way to like not eat a ton of fiber, but still get a ton of nutrients and add flavor to something that you are so sick of, right? So there's a variation of fresh herbs in here, but we can take it in like the basil, rosemary, thyme direction that we're taking it in today. We can take it into like just a kind of like more of a Thanksgiving with sage and rosemary. We can just do plain old thyme and keep it pretty neutral and simple. We can do it like with some sun-dried tomatoes, like a caprese and basil. You can do whatever you want with this risotto. I'm doing a dish later this week for this channel, Marry Me Chicken but Dairy Free. So this is going to be perfect with that, first of all. Okay. So for risotto, the other thing that I want to mention, so number one, anytime really you're making rice, I recommend you use bone broth to up that protein. And I also recommend that if you have diarrhea, prioritize that protein because you're not getting enough and you're dumping out so many of the nutrients that you're consuming that, it is kind of tricky. The other thing that I want to talk about is for risotto, we're not using regular white rice. We're using arborio rice. And arborio is an Italian grain of rice. Now, I don't know if you guys knew this, but I used to be a chef. So I've made this a bunch of times. Normally, arborio rice, the way that you would kind of get that creaminess in it without dairy, because we're not going to use dairy today, because if you have diarrhea, dairy may make it worse because only 20% of adults can digest lactose. So I don't want to make things worse for you. But a good place to start with dairy if you are trying to bring it back is Parmesan, and Parmesan would be great in this. Why? Because aged cheeses like Parmesan are going to have like little to no lactose in them, and lactose is the sugar in milk. And the sugar in milk is really what's causing that diarrhea to get worse, and that's what we can't digest. Lactate, that kind of thing, is an enzyme that digests lactose, the milk sugar. So okay, all right, tangent. So arborio rice is an Italian grain, and normally the way that we would get it to be nice and creamy without that dairy is by stirring and stirring and stirring, and we add a little bit of stock and we stir until it gets really, really dry, and then we add a little stock. that takes about probably 40 minutes of standing at the stove. And honestly, we don't have time for that, right? First of all, we're either running to the bathroom, which I really hope you're not, but if you are, still, this would be a good dish. And stay tuned, subscribe, follow, because the thing is, I'm here to make your life better and easier and also improve the quality of your life with these crazy symptoms, because we can do a lot with food and we can also do a lot with lifestyle. So, granted, neither of those things are the root cause. I would say probably in 90% of IBS cases, the root cause is a microbiome imbalance where we have too much overgrowth bacteria and not enough of our good bacteria. We'll get into that in another video. Long story short, there are a lot of different modifications that you can make with this recipe. And we're going to start with the most basic, and then I'll show you how to add into it. And we can talk about also what's tolerated and what's not. Today, I'll show you how it's plain. And then, we definitely, again, those herbs are what's up. And then also with what I'm adding is baby arugula. Now, arugula, this will be at the end, but arugula is a lettuce that looks like this. It's also called rocket, and it's kind of spicy. Now, the thing about arugula is it doesn't have high oxalates. So for those of you who are watching, like on a kidney stone diet or on some kind of low oxalate diet, then you don't have to worry about arugula. Number two, it is generally well tolerated cooked because it is a bitter green, which actually helps with digestion. So I'm loving that to add to this recipe today. All right, so anytime we're doing anything with the oven, the first step is to preheat the oven 350. Then we're going to heat up our stock because we don't want to add this rice in a cold pan, stock in a cold pan in a hot oven. It'll take too long. It'll get kind of gummy and weird. So I've got here, this is the low sodium version. Not to say that, but it's just like, let's just control whatever we can control in terms of ingredients. And one of those is definitely going to be sodium. So a 32-ounce container. So 32 ounces of bone broth. And in here, I take it, you see it has this end with the little strings on it. Let's call it strings. It's the root. So I'm going to cut it in half this way, or the root is still connected to the onion. Then I will cut just a little bit off the top here. Now, if you are sensitive to onion, then what you're going to do is probably not do anything at this step. Also, if you're sensitive to garlic, because I'm going to do both of those right now. But for you, you would skip that. You would just go straight to the next step, which is the rice. And at the end, you would add in with your fresh herbs some green onion, the green parts of a green onion for flavor, if you wanted. All right, so I've got this side, and then I have my root side. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this across, and I always want to make a claw. So cut this across, and then I'm going to cut it this way, claw, so I don't cut my fingertips off. I'm going to cut it again straight across, and you can see it makes all these little tiny things. In the layers, there's like this really thin little skin piece, and that piece will make the knife skip around and try to get you. But we're not going to let it. Next up, we're going to saute this. So we're going to add some avocado oil here. Could also be olive oil into our pan. Let that warm up. Oh my gosh, it's warm. Then add the rest of this here. See, this is pretty hot. I don't want it to be too hot because I want it to sweat. Now what that means is we want to put it on a lower heat, cover it, and let some moisture build up in here so that the fibers get really soft. Again, if you're skipping garlic and onion, you can totally skip this step. Also, one other thing, if you're skipping garlic and onion, the brand Zoop, Z-O-U-P, has a chicken broth that doesn't have any garlic or onion in it. So that's what I would recommend for this puppy. Here we go, moment of truth. See how this onion is kind of clear? And we've softened this up. Our garlic's a little brown, but it's not too brown. That's exactly what we want. Is we want it to have a nutty smell. And it's going to burn very quickly, so just be careful. I definitely don't want us to burn anything. We're just going to dump all this in. Pop this in there. So all that's in here is rice, onions, garlic, a little bit of salt, and my bone broth. All right. So now this is hot. I'm turning it off. I'm covering it up, and we're popping it in the oven. Okay, let's talk about my favorite thing to talk about, which is herbs. This is rosemary. Rosemary is the strongest, one of the strongest herbs that there is. So you don't want to use a ton whenever you're using it because it's going to really overpower all of the other flavors. This is thyme. See how tiny these are? Like you don't need a lot of like bulk with herbs to get that nutrition, and it's so concentrated that it's really wonderful. Now there are a couple different kinds of thyme, but the way that you play with thyme is you strip the stem like that. Another thing you can do is just take this thing, and you've got two ex-chefs living in this house, so we would just jam this whole thing in the whatever we're making, and whoever gets it wins a prize at dinner. But you strip the leaves off. So you can do that. That would be the easiest way. And like, there's really no award for being the most detail oriented person when you're making dinner and it's already overwhelming for you. So I don't really care what you do, honey. But yeah, I would just have thrown probably this entire thing into our dish, but I hadn't picked it yet. Thyme is cool because we live in South Carolina, and in the winter, we still have that plant outside and it lives all year. We just planted rosemary this year. I don't know rosemary. I don't know if it's going to live or not through the winter, but I'll report back. Okay. So, that would be the amount. That's probably a teaspoon of thyme. This stem is also going to have your not only nutrients, but flavor. And then basil, I got like the regular old basil plant from the supermarket and planted it outside, and it loves living outside in South Carolina. In the summer, it dies the second it gets cold, and also it needs a ton of sun. So, and water every day, sun every day. But if you get one of those plants from the supermarket, you can literally just put it on your porch or outside your front door or in a windowsill, and then you've got free basil all year. So, or all summer. And then at the end of the summer, you take it, you kind of, again, we'd pick the leaves off of here because these stems aren't great. But if I was making pesto, I'd just throw this whole thing in. I would kind of pull some of this off, and then put it in a blender with some nuts and nutritional yeast or nuts and Parmesan, olive oil, some water. Maybe we'll do pesto, but yeah, that's it. And then you have pesto, you can freeze it, which is expensive in the grocery store. So lots of uses for the basil plant. Now this is a ton of basil. I'm not going to need all of this, so we'll just stop there. But I wanted to give you an idea of the herbs, like if I was using them, what I would do. And again, herbs are so nutrient dense. They're not going to upset your stomach. And this is how we build that gently rich, diverse gut microbiome, even if we have a stomach ache. So don't sleep on the herbs. Okay, moment of truth. It's been 25 minutes. This is what our risotto is going to look like. Now, anytime I pull something out of the oven, I like to immediately cover it with a little rag so that I know this came out of the oven. What I want to do is stir this. I want to stir this vigorously because that's what's going to develop the starches. Now, something else I want to do is taste it. See how it's getting stickier? As it gets stickier, and you can hear it too, as it gets stickier, you can see that it soaks up a lot of that moisture. And so I do have some hot water over here. We're just going to do one little ladle of it. I'm going to season. Okay. I'm going to add my guys. Actually, that does not need much. Give it some pepper. And because this is dairy free, we're just using olive oil. We're not using, but this is when you would add like butter and Parmesan or nutritional yeast if that's what you were doing. Now, here's the cool thing. Yes, it makes a little bit of a mess, but listen, that's my brand, okay? I'm letting the heat from the rice cook these greens and herbs. And the reason that I add this at the end is so that it doesn't get all weird and mushy. Also, with herbs, for the most part, you want that fresh herb flavor. And that comes from fresh herbs at the end. When you put them in at the beginning, it kind of tastes more like you put dry herbs in there, and you didn't go through all that with the fresh herbs just to mute these wonderful flavors. And also it does leach out some of that nutritional content. All right. So this is what it's going to look like. And then right away, I want to go ahead, plate it up. So I've got a serving of risotto in here. That's going to be about a cup. And then we can pair this with any protein we would want. But right now, we're just going to do the risotto. A little bit of basil. And there you go. Dairy-free, protein-rich, and microbiome supporting risotto.